Is it software?
Yes, we
Is it
went live
program?
July 5th. And so we're processing all of our permits, violations, and complaints through the Munis software program.
And be glad you have that instead of Excel, which is what Virginia Beach uses, and it's a nightmare.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2, upcoming meetings and activities. On July 18th, we have the Board of Historic and Architectural Review meeting. That's at 6:30 here at the center. Also Tuesday, July 18th at 7:30 p.m. is the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. July 24th, we have Town Council Committee meetings at 3 p.m. Tuesday, August 1st is Town Council meeting, and if necessary, the next Planning Commission meeting will be held on August 8th, 6:30 p.m. here at the Smithfield Center. Item number 3, public comments.
Where's
We have no
everybody
sign-ups.
now?
The public does not wish to comment. Okay. Item number 3, comment sections, portion is closed. Item number 4, Planning Commission comments.
Yes, I have one comment. At the last meeting, we dealt with multiple special use permits, and number 3, however it was read, we ultimately did not recommend item number 3 to the town council, but in thinking through that item, when I proposed the motion, it basically stated that we favored not allowing building heights which drop the building height to 35 feet, which meant the hotel and the 3-story buildings in the Luter project would be in excess of 35 feet. So therefore, none of those buildings would be allowed the way we passed it to the town council. That was not my intention in the motion, and so therefore, I've spoken with Attorney Riddick about it, and he just suggested I write an email to the town council saying, hey, that really wasn't our intention. I don't mind a hotel at the height they've agreed to and the 3rd-story building at the height they agreed to. What I disagree with is the 4-story building height. So therefore, I need to send an email to Mayor Bowman about it, but if y'all have any specific thoughts on that motion, you should make it aware to the town council how you feel, because they ultimately have the decision and what they're gonna do with the motion anyways. But that was my clarification point. That was sort of an oversight when I made the motion and did not realize the unintended consequence of denying the motion meant we dropped it to 35 feet, which would have made null and void all of the recommendations for the building height. So if you have a strong opinion, send a email to Mayor Bowman about it, but I am going to draft an email sometime this week to him, but I wanted to make sure the way that motion came across did not exactly come out the way I thought it was going to come out.
Well, if there's you can discuss this, if there's a consensus and you can agree on it, the planning commission could make a recommendation on whatever it's not a new vote on the special use permit, but you could express your opinion or if you can come to a consensus on that.
Gotcha.
You can do it now if you want to, or you can.
That was my opinion, and that's the way I meant for it to come across. That's not exactly the way it came across in the meeting, but that was my intention. And I don't know if y'all had thoughts or feelings on that, but for me, it was about, I don't want the 4th-story building in the historic area. Therefore, I was trying to exclude the height restriction. I don't care about the height restriction or height not in concordance with the plan for the hotel or the 3-story building, however you wish to say that.
So what we gotta do, put a motion on the floor?
Well, I don't think it's really not a,
Can you amend the old motion, even though
well,
we're closed out?
actually you could.
Okay.
You could, because you can make you can amend your motion to express that you disapprove the proposed special use permit for a 4-story building at, what's the height, Danny?
I think it was 52.
Mr. Riddick,
I would
56.
suggest that's a very slippery slope to adjust a motion after, especially when it's not advertised. I think and I don't have a dog in this fight because I'm not talking about it, but just from a planning commission standpoint, I think if Dr. Pope wishes to amend it and send the email, I thought that was very appropriate. And if there's others that want to join on, that's, their call. But I think to amend the motion at this point is a very slippery slope that this planning commission probably ought
Well,
not
I also
be a part
don't
of.
want us to be accused of not being transparent and emailing the mayor in private. You know, I feel like we need to take a stand here. I'm certain there are people watching this meeting tonight perhaps, just to see what follow-up conversations may be, or what we're gonna do about entrance corridor overlay that maybe weren't persuaded to come out tonight. So I would rather see us at least, even if Dr. Pope's still gonna do an email, at least if we are in consensus about, you know, the fact that we do have some unintended consequences, if we're in consensus that that was not our intent, if we have a majority that feels the same way, that perhaps we could put something forth formally as a recommendation to council. Not amend a motion,
Well,
but
your
to put
point is,
forth
but
another
all of this
recommendation.
is, it's, the actions by the planning commission are recommendations to the town council.
Right,
And if so, if your action at your last meeting does not accurately reflect your recommendation, you can correct that.
right.
I mean, I know what Mr. Pack is saying, but that's, if what you did doesn't reflect the consensus of the body,
Right.
then you
I
can
think
fix
it's
that.
just semantics. I would just rather we do that in a public forum
Well,
if we can achieve consensus on what it is we want to do.
and you have
But
to
we've had the public forum, and Dr. Pope by his own admission said, this is not what my intentions were
Right.
when I made this motion. So
And
if
and
that
I
were-
agree with the fact that we didn't understand the unintended consequences. And I am in agreement with what he would like to do as well.
So I'm more, I think it appears more transparent by what he just said if we amend that motion. And I don't think there's anything in Robert Rules of Order that speaks against amending a motion.
Yeah, I don't, maybe amend a motion is perhaps the wrong term. We need to amend our recommendation.
Well,
It's a motion,
It's a
though.
Yeah.
motion to
Yeah.
recommend to
Potato,
the
potato.
town
Okay.
council that.
Okay,
A motion is just your action. I mean,
Exactly.
it's not this inviolate piece of
Right.
legislation or anything. It's the opinion, the consensus of the body. So if you want to state what your consensus is, you can do that.
are we in consensus on that item?
As I remember, that wasn't a unanimous thing.
It was
anyway.
3-4.
Beg pardon?
The vote was 3-4.
That's what I thought.
Oh,
Well, I mean, obviously, we don't have to do anything with it. The ultimate burden rests on the town council to decide what they wish to
Right.
do with it.
That's true.
It
That
was
is my
just-
thought, and I'm in line with what Councilman Pack is recommending. We do not make another motion to amend the previous motion. It is on town council's table.
okay,
We've done our part.
okay.
Dr. Pope wants to send an email to the mayor, then I think he could do that. And town council, for sake of transparency, town council, if they decide, the mayor decide, they could read Dr. Pope's email to the public.
And I think that's appropriate to alert them to the fact that perhaps we didn't intend for that to happen as a result.
But the dissenting votes, if you have an opinion, you can send that as an email to Bowman as well to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is how I took the motion and how I interpret it. They still ultimately have the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
So,
I would be appreciative if anybody was emailing council if they would copy the rest of us.
But wouldn't that constitute a meeting, planning commission meeting?
No,
Is that?
It would not?
no, emails are not meetings.
Just public records.
I mean, they're
When you
subject
have
to,
multiple, when you
They'd
have,
be subject to FOIA
They're
requests.
subject to the Freedom of Information Act,
Yeah.
but people email town council members every day.
yeah,
They're subject to the Freedom of Information Act. That doesn't constitute a meeting.
so an email communication among the whole planning commission would not constitute a meeting.
no,
Well, that's a different story. I mean, if you get into, if you're talking about a chat group where you're all at one time communicating with each other, I don't think that's what you're talking about, are you?
No,
Okay.
it's an email.
I think you're just copying these individuals, right?
That's what my
For
request
informational
was meant
purposes
to be,
only.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's just a request, it's not a requirement.
You don't have to do anything, but you can if you want to. It's up to you.
Exactly.
Can we ask the question, the ones that voted against, if Dr. Pope has now said a mistake was made, can we approach them and say if they've changed, if this will change their mind on voting for it?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Where this, the whole census went to the council, that everybody was on board with it?
I just think one of one of the issues that you probably won't change people's minds in the vote because they were clear in what they voted for. Dr. Pope just add the caveat that, hey, look, I didn't want to cut off all buildings. This is specifically the 4-story building. If we're not going to do anything and everyone, I think, is comfortable with Dr. Pope sending the email, you know, necessarily have to courtesy copy anyone.
That's-
You just want to be transparent.
You could also come to the council meeting and speak if you wish.
Correct.
You have something to say, Attorney Reddick?
I'm sitting here trying to think it all through. I'm not really sure where we are about this.
I want to keep this simple.
I agree.
And starting with Dr. Pope's email, I'm good with that.
Well, that's his personal expression. Doesn't have anything to do with you. Everybody has their own opinions. And he can communicate as he wishes, and as well as can you.
Yes.
But that's not consensus, that's not action by the planning commission. That's just, for your information, this is what I understood and intended, for whatever it's worth.
Your email to town council, the mayor. But I am not in favor of another motion on something that we've already forwarded to town council.
Well, we don't have consensus on that, so.
So there's no, I expect no emotion then. We should expect no emotion.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other items for discussion?
Let me restate that. I would like to send an email on my intention. You do what you wish to do on your intention.
That's the way I understood
I'll
it.
go along with that one.
Good save, Dr. Pope, good save.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it. Okay, thank you.
Good save.
Comments from the commission on any other matters?
I guess I would like to ask the question procedurally with those special use permits. If council goes along with our recommendations that we sent to date, who would be modifying the special use permit? Is it up to the applicant to change what they're asking for? And should they change what they're asking for prior to it going to the board?
It's already been advertised as it was originally proposed.
Right.
All right, nothing changes about that. That's how it's been advertised. You as a body you're recommended for all of them except one.
Except one.
Okay, so it's off your plate.
Right.
Okay, it's for the applicant to make their case as to why it should be granted, and if they decide if they get into a dialogue and reach some other common ground, that's between the town council and the applicant. But
And that's, I guess, what I was asking is from the way it was presented, do they have the opportunity to change what has been presented and get the board to approve that? Or if they change that special use permit request, does it come back through the whole process
They can
again?
get anything up to and less than what's been advertised. Can't be more, but it can be less.
Okay.
But that's, because that's what's been advertised.
It does not come back to planning commission
It does not.
unless it's a substantial change.
Substantial change. Okay.
Any further discussion on any matter for the planning commission? Hearing none. Item number 4, closed. Item number 5, discussion item. Chesapeake Bay exception application. This is for tax plan number 22E-01-098, Michael Rowe, the applicant. Could we have the report, please?
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant wishes to obtain a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area exception in accordance with the Smithfield zoning ordinance, Article 3P, Section I-4. This would be to construct a new single-family dwelling on a pre-Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area. The Smithfield zoning ordinance, Article 3P, Section G3C2, permits encroachment into the buffer area provided the single-family dwelling meets the following conditions. It's the minimum necessary to achieve a reasonable buildable area. Where practical, the vegetated area that will maximize water quality protection and mitigate the effects of the buffer encroachment into the buffer area shall be established elsewhere on the lot or parcel, and the encroachment may not extend into the seaward 50 feet of the buffer area. The proposed single-family dwelling will encroach approximately 50 feet into the landward 50 feet of the 100-foot RPA buffer. To help lessen the potential impact, the applicant will also be requesting a special yard exception in order to encroach into the 35-foot front yard setback, providing a front yard setback of 27.44 feet. This project would result in approximately 3,544.63 square feet of dwelling located in the landward 50-foot and an approximate 157 square foot rear deck. Any additional disturbance caused by the construction of the dwelling would require appropriate mitigation. The proposed landscaping mitigation plan does comply with the required landscaping. This application did appear before the Planning Commission as a public hearing at the Tuesday, June 13th, 2023 meeting. This application was tabled to allow the applicant the opportunity to illustrate a rear deck on the property. Town staff support this application with the suggestion that the applicant constructs the single-family dwelling in the footprint that does the least amount of disturbance within the 100-foot RPA as possible, and the applicant is required to comply with landscaping mitigation requirements. Additionally, town staff suggest any approvals are contingent on the successful acquisition of a front yard exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The strengths of this application is the buffer area would result in the loss of a buildable area. The weakness, approval of this application would result in development and disturbance within the 50-foot landward RPA buffer. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant is not here. Planning Commission comments.
Mr. Chairman, we looked at this last month and had some discussion on it, and was made the recommendation that if they wanted anything else ever in this, to make sure they ask for it now. The applicant has done that with the addition of a 13 by 16 depth, 13 by 16 foot deck. He is keeping everything inside the 50 foot. We cannot permit any closer. And we also made the comment that this lot would otherwise be undevelopable. With that in mind, I would make the motion that we recommend approval of this, or actually that we approve this with staff recommendation. One thing to really consider on staff recommendation is that he still will need a front yard exception from the BZA. So if he's unable to get this front yard exception, this does not fly. But otherwise, I do recommend that we approve this as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Further discussion. There's something here, and Director Clary has tried to explain this to me. But in the project description, he's including a gravel driveway. You know, this is in a suburban residential area. Does anyone have any concern with that?
You can have gravel driveways.
There's gravel driveways all over town.
Yeah.
Okay. So this doesn't require any special consideration or waivers or anything?
No.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the application, contingent upon requirements that the Board of Zoning Appeals will approve their waiver as requested. Call for the vote.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Davison?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Swecker?
Yes.
Mr. Yoko?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Application, motion approved. Next on our agenda, we have a discussion item. It's item number 6. It's the entrance corridor overlay guidelines update. There's no staff report, and I think it's for the planning commission, considering all the things that we've done in the past year, including updating the comprehensive plan and how it relates now, how the entrance corridor overlay relates to the updated comprehensive plan. Now, there were some new objectives that was implemented from the comprehensive plan of 7522 that alters some of the ECO guidelines. And it condensed it to make the comprehensive plan was condensed to be more user-friendly, not only to local government, but to citizens as well. And now we're at the point of making sure the entrance corridor overlay ordinance reflects what's in that comprehensive plan. One of the things I know we focused on previously was to ensure that required landscape is maintained to planning, to maturity, replacing dead vegetation when necessary. The amend entrance corridor overlay district to have more robust design and landscaping standards. Some new ECO objectives. Eliminate reduced requirements for buffered yards and setbacks and increase the amount of distance between varying uses. One I found quite interesting was eliminate change floor area ratio, the FAR requirements, to allow for more creative design of buildings. It encourages new development opportunities, mixed use, compact, walkable, and retain characteristics of adjacent neighborhoods. And one of the things I would like to see some correction on is plan submission. When the applicant, considering what happened with DMV, and the applicant's complaint that we were the last ones to see what he was offering, I would like to add text that strongly encourages the applicant to present the initial conceptual plan to the PC for comment. This is a courtesy to the applicant. It's not a requirement. I'm not requesting a requirement, but if we could make it clear in the ECO that it's to the applicants.
Well, along those lines, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we used to do pre-application meetings.
Yes.
And I don't know when those stopped.
Yes.
But especially for bigger projects, they were very helpful because we could say, this typically doesn't fly because, or
Yes.
so-and-so really hates this and we suggest you amend this. Now, I don't know if that flies in the face of all the things we hear about transparency, but it did help us get a better application package, and it helped the applicant deal with some of the things up front that tend to delay the process for them. And for them, as we know, time is money. It typically would be 2 planning commission members if possible, along with staff and the applicant team, whoever they felt was, most important to have at that meeting. Very informal, very big picture, and it started at the very initial phase of a project, just to talk concepts. If they had any kind of plan or drawings, we would take a look at it, but sometimes it was even before that, so they didn't, spend a whole lot of money right out of the gate. And we found that to be very beneficial for both parties.
Yes. So how do we make it apparent to any applicant?
Make it mandatory.
I'm sorry?
Make it mandatory before you submit your application.
Yeah, and we do that in Virginia Beach. We have a process, there, literally just like everything else, there's a form for that, to set up a pre-application meeting. And it discusses there's checklists for the parameter, type of project, that sort of thing. And it's mandatory that they schedule an appointment before they submit a formal application. And that's not for every garage or, front porch or whatever, but for a big development project, certainly it is a requirement.
Yes.
We did that with Pierceville, and it really did help.
Yes.
It really helped.
There was a number of others I remember as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we do it?
We could do something similar to what we're doing in VHAR, where we outline the application process. We do mention it in here, but we could create something that was more tailored to that pre-application meeting and providing conceptual drawings and materials.
Sometimes it's a challenge to get commission members to be able to attend, and juggle that schedule, because all of us have, most of us anyway, have day jobs too. So sometimes it's a challenge, but I think it's very worthwhile. We had some good discussions, and it made projects go a lot better, I thought.
Yes.
As a suggestion, I'm thinking that ECO application that the applicants see, could a line be added to that?
To the actual ECO application?
Yes.
Okay.
Instead of amending, adding something to the ECO.
But you're not gonna wanna have one for every single
No,
ECO that comes down the pike.
no.
No.
But where it
But
is appropriate is where there is a development of a number of homes, whether it be
Right.
6, we can look at what's being built on James Street now. That would have been appropriate to have, and there's 8 homes being built there, right?
Right.
That's not too big. But if you need a garage, so perhaps
Right.
to
I don't care about
define
the
this.
shed.
Sure, I understand, but
But I
perhaps
care
to
about-
define this,
Yeah.
we say commercial properties
Yeah.
or, residential properties in excess of 2 dwellings.
Right.
And that way, you don't see too many of them in there for 2 or 3. Usually they're larger,
Yeah.
but, we had, I specifically remember being in one where somebody wanted to put some, behind Taco Bell, a large development around the lake there, and they wanted to rezone it downtown neighborhood residential. I was like, man, this is not gonna fly.
No.
This is not what
No,
we're
not-
into here. And it never went any further, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
We can give them some idea at that point of exposure, and it's typically for larger developments, right?
Right.
And so when you give them some guidance of what our expectations are on day one, either they're not interested in it, and if they're not interested in meeting our expectations, we don't want them here anyhow.
Right. It saves everybody a lot of time.
Yep.
Can that just be handled at a staff level?
So what we've done in the past is that the Director of Planning and Development will put it together, and then you would have, VDOT would be there.
Right.
Members of the town, Public Works would be there, the fire department would have representatives there. And then we had 2 members of Planning Commission, was generally the chairman and whoever the chairman, could get to come to the meeting. And it was during day hours, and, it was a nice just talk through of the plans, and the applicant has a basic concept at that point and can see some of the challenges they're fitting by multiple agencies, not just Planning Commission or just VDOT. They get some pre-application feedback that will help guide their design. And it's a business-friendly model to help, so that if somebody really does want to come to town and they want to meet our expectations and we're interested, we at least are giving them some guidance on how to do so.
Yeah. So they're not flying blind.
Really, well, the county does this already, but it's coordinated through the Economic Development Office, because it's their theory that they're facilitating development in the county, and by bringing all the parties together before they ever file the application, they do all the things you just talked about. And so it's sort of seen as an entree to the whole process.
Right.
And it's encouraged by their staff. It's offered by economic development. We don't have economic development, but there's no reason why Tammy's office can't do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tim, what is our, I mean, I know we're going through our ECO design guidelines. Are we hiring a consultant to work through this with us to match with the comp plan, or what's the process here?
Yes, we did award the contract to Paleo West. We were put on hold while we waited for the Grange application to move through Planning Commission.
I'm sorry, what was the consultant?
It's Paleo West.
Thank you.
And right now, we're trying to get some ideas from the planning commissioners so that we can report back and have a second initial kickoff meeting with the consultants to
Okay.
kind of give them ideas on what you would like to see, so that we can then bring them in and arrange, foster discussions. But right now, we're still just trying to gather some information so that we can report back to the consultants.
Okay, so with that kind of in mind, we did a lot of this work, a lot of the heavy lifting with the comp plan. We kind of talked about what we wanted and where we wanted it and whatnot. So when we do the design guidelines, now we're getting more into the specifics. What do we want to see? What's acceptable to us? And I think that's where we kind of really nail down, not only, where do we want our commercial district, but what do we want our commercial district to look like, and what is acceptable to us and what is not. And to that end, this is where I plead with everybody here, and I think we're all kind of in the same idea. Is, let's not let something in here that doesn't meet our design standards or our desires for this town. So we just went through, the Grange, and before that went through Mallory Scott, and all you heard from the public was, we want to keep our small town charming, right? And I don't think there's anybody on here that disagrees with that, and I don't think any of the votes reflected anything other than our desire to keep that. So as we do that, let's not cheapen our material list. This is where we can say, we want brick. We don't want cinder block. We don't want it to look like anything but a nice town. And this is where we can differentiate ourselves between some other towns that don't have zoning quite as strict as ours. I always, enjoyed riding through Williamsburg, because I think they've done such a good job there. Their Wendy's look high-end, and our Wendy's looks high-end.
Right.
And I think we need to continue with that, so that we can make Smith, this is our opportunity to keep Smithfield a unique town with a pleasant appearance. Heavy landscaping, and obviously we made a mistake somewhere along the line with our landscaping to make sure that it gets brought back up to speed and that it's maintained. We obviously know we need to do better about a maintenance clause for our landscaping, whether it be, a irrigation system or what. But as we go through each of our areas in town, there's some really great pictures in our comp plan that I referenced several times that go from kind of Red Point Tavern looking up towards Q Daddy's, and what the artists in that envision that street looking like if you move the buildings a little closer to the road. And this is where we can really get into some of that fun piece. And I encourage us that as we work through this with the consultants, that we refer back to our comp plan and then our ideas of what we want the town to look like. So you really get into the skin of the buildings, really the aesthetics of what everything's going to look like. And as you just kind of flip through some of the pictures in here, it's pretty well written
Yeah.
already. I don't imagine anything being a major change to it. When we talked about the comp plan, we talked about being able to walk from one side of town to the other, or ride our bikes, or whatever the case might be. And we probably need to do a little bit better job in here of reinforcing that point. And it may be that, we even get into some part where if you're remodeling a business, you dedicate a portion of your frontage for the future bike path. I wouldn't go so far as the county. The county did that out on 17, so you'll have sections of 100 foot of asphalt that are now
Yeah,
overgrown.
sidewalks to nowhere,
Right.
yeah.
So I don't suggest that we get that far, but if it does come, that there is a location for that, to do it. And that's just kind of what we think about. So when you ride through town, just put on your thinking hat, hey, what would make this prettier? What do we want to see here?
The other thing I detest is being married to a retailer for a very long time. As much as I love well-done landscaping, I hate so much landscaping that you can't see what the businesses are.
Correct.
And I hate
And where it's positioned.
I hate big signage, but I hate signage that's too discreet that you can't tell what businesses are. So I like creative signage and things that tell you where businesses are without being, in your face billboards kind of things and those stupid little flags everybody wants to put out. But I like street trees. I like the way Main Street is landscaped and treed. But we don't need maybe so many trees so close together that you can't see what businesses we have in town and what folks have to offer.
And it becomes a safety concern for some of those as well. I remember
Yeah.
talking with the
Yeah.
owners of Royal Farms, and they were saying, well, can we cut
That's where
down
the
some of our
scary people
landscaping?
hide, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't think so. And they're like, well, you can't
Yeah.
see into our building right now.
Right.
We're worried about
Those trees are
robberies.
gonna grow,
Yeah.
And it's a true safety concern, for the long term. So let's not get too carried away with the trees and the shrubs, but, keep in mind, street trees are nice and flowers are nice, but safety is a concern as well.
Yeah.
And retail success is a concern too.
How's that for some guidance, Tammy?
Can we get I know I've asked this question before in multiple meetings in the past, but can we get as specific as saying we would like to see a certain themed tree throughout our town? So if a Smithfield town tree is an elm tree, that we want that on every site plan to be our lining trees,
I
or
think we
live
can.
oaks, or whatever we like? Can we
And
be
you
as
don't want
specific
red
as that?
tip,
Yeah. I mean,
things like that.
you're picking out something that, it goes right along with our signage. Like if you drove down here and we were Crepe Myrtle City, USA, that kind of becomes part of our theme, just like we want all our signage to match. And we say it here in our ECO, we need to have a theme. I think that's very,
But I've asked that in the
Positive.
sense of street lights and street
Yeah,
lamps
you
and
have to be
things of that
careful
nature.
because, so years ago, the Bradford pear was
The tree of the
the
world,
be-all,
and it's the
end-all of
worst
trees,
tree
and
there
now
is.
It's the worst tree
It
ever.
is. It's
So-
structurally unsound.
It
It's a
is.
terrible tree.
So you have to be really careful when you do
Yeah.
something like that. There's a lot of unintended consequences.
I would offer a list of preferred trees. Not mandatory so much.
I don't know, I like Dr. Pope's suggestion. If you mandate it, and something solid, like obviously, we know Bradford pear falls in a freeze, but
But
an
I mean, a
elm
list
doesn't,
of-
or a oak
of
doesn't.
Preferred options
Yeah.
for trees.
Well, the one thing, and this goes back a long way because a lot of you weren't involved in all this, but Main Street, the big street tree on Main Street is called a yellow cobra. And I've never heard of it before, but go look at it because it's a pretty amazing tree. It grows up like this. It's like a big fat, and it doesn't have low hanging branches, so it doesn't interfere with sight lines or anything like that. But it's grown into an amazing canopy over Main Street. It's phenomenal, and I think that's right. Pretty sure that's what's called, a yellow cobra or a Zell cobra or something like that. But it's just we had a recommendation from an arborist who said, this is what you really need if you want big street trees that are gonna provide shade and what you're looking for. And so don't just,
You don't want to dictate what's
Don't-
not going to survive in the area it's
Yeah.
put as well.
be
'cause-
careful. I mean, you probably need some guidance on that, truly.
Yeah.
Well, don't we already have a list of approved trees?
Not approved trees, I don't think so.
No?
There are plenty of lists
Recommended.
out there for Hampton Roads from Virginia Tech Extension Service. They, horticulturalists have a list designed for Hampton Roads.
Native, yes. Native.
Natives or non-natives that are non-invasive. There are plenty of lists to pull from out there.
Okay.
you know, what we're looking at is new construction, right? Which there's not probably gonna be a ton in here, but there will be some, and remodel. So as you look at this, and I'm just kind of flipping through this design guideline now, and it shows, you know, South Church Street from the Route 10 bypass to Battery Park Road, and the first picture says that as wide as this corridor is a typical commercial strip. And that's true. But, you know, as some of those homes turn over, they may wish to become office buildings. And that's where we kind of want to give that guidance as they turn over. We don't need them to change right now. Somebody lives in their home, please don't ask them to change it to whatever our new design is. But as it changes hands and changes purpose, that's where we can say, well, this is what we'd like to see here. And this is how you start to slowly, I mean, it even says in here that moderate changes in vision on this corridor, which is likely. You know, it's like, there'll be some, but there won't be a lot. So, you know, as the bank changes or whatever else, we have guidelines of what we want to see there. And you're not going to change the way that South Church Street looks in that area overnight, but maybe over 20 or 30 or 40 years. You know, I think that's some of the area from the Cypress Creek Bridge going into our historic district to, you know, out to the Route 10 bypass. That's probably some of the most improved parts of the town that we could work on, and setting up those guidelines for those as they change, and as they change slowly, we can develop that area into something that's more in line with perhaps a historic district. But you set those guidelines up now so that we don't, you know, hopefully that future planning commissions don't give every exception that there is, but we do need to provide for exception because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 or 40 years from now.
Tammy, do you have a desired timetable for this?
I do not. We are currently behind schedule as the RFP was awarded back in February.
Okay.
So we are willing to work with the planning commissioners to make
Do you
sure
have
that.
an end of contract date with the consultant? Or is that open?
I will have to check
Okay.
and let you know. Thank you.
What about,
Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I was gonna say, what about if people are doing renovations, and if they do a certain percentage of renovations, when do they have to strictly adhere to the ECO guidelines? So if you know, like in a hurricane, if you get more than 50% damage, it's considered a new build or whatever they do, or however y'all determine that. But at what point, if somebody takes a house on Church Street, do you say, okay, now you need to pave a parking lot, now you gotta do this, you gotta get rid of gravel, you gotta bring it up? Is it just if it's improved 10%, 20%, 80%, tear it down and build a new one? I mean, are we gonna define on a renovation a dollar amount or a percentage of construction that then says now you have to fully comply?
I mean, I think we could have that conversation and have that. I mean, I think it'd be appropriate perhaps a change of use from or change of zoning anyhow from residential to commercial. That should certainly trigger some improvement to the property. I mean, your percentage piece is certainly worthy of discussion of what would trigger it. I think your question is one that we should certainly think about and work through to give that guidance of when these new ECOs kick in. Because, I mean, the whole idea is that eventually we would like it all to look more in line with our ECO guidelines, right? Not with old regulations. So, I mean, I think that's worthy of discussion, Dr. Pope.
His point is well taken, because we had this conversation 15 or 20 years ago when we came up with the current zoning ordinance, and people come along and they want to rezone their properties, particularly along South Church Street, and it always becomes a money issue, and people just say, I can't afford to do this. We require them to rezone the property for a certain use, but then you give them something with one hand and take away with the other, because they are, I cannot tell you how many times there have been exceptions granted for paving and things like that, and because it's such a big ticket item. And so your point is well taken. You want it to become elevated to a level that you want to see, but then it becomes a money issue, and over the years, there are a lot of waivers that have been granted.
So there's an example right on that strip right now that was just a little building and now it's probably, what, 2 or 3 times that size. When you look at Red Point, they've added and added and added and added a deck on the back and have filled that whole lot. But it doesn't look anything like what you would want that lot to have been developed into.
Right.
So, how do you, like you said, how do you flip that switch when somebody changes that use to, because like I said, you're right, is that investment now, here's a piece of unused property that we want to make sure that we're getting some use out of, getting some tax base out of, serving the public, improving, what it looks like. But how do you flip that switch to do the whole investment to get it to what you want it to look like?
But Dr. Pope, you was focusing on remodeling or
Well, if they have,
or
additional. If you have new construction, that's easy, I think. It's the remodels that are gonna be the gray zone. How much remodel will you allow? How much will you let me paint the building, change the roof, put new gutters on, and say, wait a second, I got a new building from the outside, which is what we care about, then what happens to the landscaping and the pavement and the parking lots and the curb and gutter and everything else that goes into that?
And to that point, wouldn't a building permit trigger some of this? A new requirement, meeting the requirements?
Not necessarily,
No?
because if you have a mixed-use corridor, because you still have a lot of residential use along there. And the zoning districts were designed to accommodate that. The RO was residence office. It's kind of it's a transitional zone. The idea was, I think everybody hoped that over the years, all those little small houses would become offices, and a lot of them have. There's insurance companies, and there's a music studio, and over the years, lots and lots of uses commercial uses have filled in, but there's still a lot of residential over there, and it's pretty difficult to tell a homeowner who's been living there for 20 years that, well, we just put some entrance corridor overlay design, and you can't just fix your house up like you want to. I mean, it's not really the historic district. It's a different animal.
I certainly think rezoning is very appropriate, but
Yeah.
it's how do you take the 7-Eleven and somebody's gonna come in and say, I wanna turn it into a restaurant. How did that now trigger what do we need to make sure they're up to date with on their property?
That's a pretty easy example because it's a big change in use. I think the change in use definitely triggers the application of your guidelines.
Every time I see us work on a special use thing, we always have, a big heart, like, we want to help the business out, and we got to consider that what do we want the ultimate end product to do? We look at a business like, I need more parking, but I can't afford to pave. I want to put down some gravel. And this planning commission on multiple occasions said, yeah, we can make that work because we don't want to stomp on some of these small business dreams, right? And so we just got to keep that in mind when we design these. Do we want to allow for exceptions, or do we want these to, not be exceptions? Or where do we draw the line? It's like this is our line in the sand. This is where our minimum meetings. Maybe some things we can waver on, but I think we need to consider that as well as what is our line in the sand? Where do we not want to allow for special use? Because this commission, these 8 members sitting here, are not going to be here forever. There's going to be 8 new members at some point in time. And they may take things differently. So this is our opportunity to say, this is our vision for the town, and we can cement it to some degree. I mean, we get 8 new members on here, and the ECO guidelines could go all the way, go away. Like I said, we don't want guidelines. Build whatever you want, But this is our opportunity to say, this is our line in the sand. If you're gonna need additional parking, you must pave it. And I'm only using that as an example. That's not what I'm trying to do today. But we need to consider that too, is like, if it's a 50% destroyed property and it has to be rebuilt, that's what we accept. What are the minimum things we require? We're gonna, require this minimum amount of plantings, and there are no exceptions for that. We're gonna require you to pave your parking lot because you're commercial, and there are no exceptions. If you wanna be commercial, if you wanna get a permit from us to do this, you must agree to pave your parking lot. And those are just examples, but I think we need to look at those because those are things we've given exceptions to in the past.
Shouldn't we look at some more, I guess, up-to-date things? Shouldn't we look at permeable pavers? Shouldn't we look at
Sure.
some more, stormwater-friendly, eco-friendly options?
Absolutely.
I don't think the answer is to pave everything anymore.
Hard surface versus gravel surface. It's a lot more
Well,
flexibility.
I wasn't saying that's my bailiwick. That's not what I'm hanging my hat on. I'm just saying that we do need, I'm looking back at the things we've given special use on, exceptions on, and why we've done it. And are we okay today with why we've done that? Is that still something that we do? So when we write into our ordinances, that we write in where we will allow for exceptions and where we won't, whether it be one thing or the other.
Well, let me just give another example. Let's take Mo Canada surveying, and he hires a new surveyor and wants to put an addition in the back of his building because he needs some new office space. At what point would we say, wow, that's a big change? It's not a change in use, but it's a change in size, change in, things like that. When would you take an existing business and say, all right, or I'm going to add another addition? When are you going to say, what do I need? When do I need to make sure I'm in full compliance with this? Because that, if it's a change in use, rezoning, that's a little bit easier, but what do you do with somebody like that? Or who's gonna add on? When do you say, hey, a 10 by 10 office or 30 by 50 office?
All right, so to complicate that, we take that same example and we allow a 10 by 10 office and that doesn't facilitate it. And then he hires another surveyor and he's another 10 by 10 office. Where does that base? I mean, he could do 10 by 10 offices in theory forever, right? So, there's not a
Well,
super
10 by
easy
10
way.
office is a cell, first of all.
You're missing the point, you're missing the point of it.
Then we're using containers and having the tiniest houses.
So,
And the landscaping thing, I'll just tell you, you need to make sure whatever your requirements are reasonable. Because the thing I represent lots of people, not in the town, but in other jurisdictions, who have to deal with it, and when the landscaping requirement is so onerous that they just look at it and they go, it's a $40,000 or $60,000 bill, they just go, we're not gonna do this.
No.
It has to be reasonable.
and we've given exception for that before for that very reason.
Yeah, but if you when you dictate it, if you come up with something that's a reasonable level of landscaping, but there's a requirement that it be maintained, then you get what you want. But if you, oh my gosh, I've seen landscaping schedules that would just blow your mind in other localities. You just go, and they go, I'm not gonna do the project.
This landscaping in the ECO book is very generalized, but do we have a very specific planting guide for them that says that you have to have 56 shrubs per square foot or whatever they do? Because these landscape designers come in with these elaborate designs, and then we look at it, and then they get a $100,000 budget, and we look at it and say, what are we trimming down? Does the town have a schedule or something?
So there's also landscaping in Article 3R, which is the ECO guidelines in the zoning ordinance, which is a different document than the guidelines for the entrance corridor overlay. In addition to that, there's also a landscaping section, and then we also have landscaping in our parking section for parking lots as well.
Do those individual documents need to be pulled with this when they're reviewing all of this, so we can see it all together? Meaning with this consultant, when they come back and get this, do they need to have access to that?
They should look at them in concert. They should look at the guidelines in concert with the zoning ordinance.
Yes, we're going to make sure that the zoning ordinance is in conformance with the overlay guidelines that the Planning Commission would like to see.
Well, I think if we're looking at specifics and how onerous is this going to be, I think we need to be looking at this while we're reviewing all of this.
But if I could recall correctly, it currently requires something like 10 or 20% canopy coverage in the landscaping?
There are canopy coverage percentages,
Yeah.
correct.
So with native trees, again, I don't think we want to make this too complicated.
I'm not saying you shouldn't require landscaping, I'm just saying make sure whatever you require is reasonable.
Yes.
What we have now is certainly not awful. It's almost 20 years old, you guys. It's 18 years old. And I just looked at who was on planning commission when we did this in 2005. It was none of us. So to my point, it may be changed by future commissions, but we do the best that we can.
Yeah, and we're not changing that much. I mean, a lot of it is just carryover. We're just making tweaks.
Well, specifics for me, if you're gonna do a building, for me, it should be all brick in the town. And I think your building should be 85% brick and let them come back with the design. That's just if you're gonna give specifics and say, look, no split face cinder block, no concrete block. If you're gonna do trash sites, they should all be brick. I don't think we should be mixing a whole, or at least material consistent with whatever's on the outside of that building. But I don't think it should be siding, garbage can enclosures and things
There
of
may
that
be
nature.
some case for cementous siding.
Well, look at the building behind,
But-
the orthodontist building on, behind the,
The auto stores?
auto stores.
Smithfield Ortho or whatever?
Yeah, that's a really good, that's a very attractive building.
It is.
So I don't know, that was done by, of course, Danny Smith did it. Of course, everything he did well, but, it was designed to look very colonial.
It's a very classic colonial building, which allows that to amend to that. But a modern building with siding on it would not be, a Wendy's like that may not be.
Well, that's what I was
Correct,
gonna get
yeah.
to. You have a lot of the houses and the old buildings and stuff that are in town. Most of the commercial stuff is definitely brick, but a lot of the housing and everything, it's all sided and it's all colonial siding and whatever, so. I don't agree that everything has to be brick, but,
But this is only for commercial, this isn't for residential, right?
Yeah,
right, but you got a lot of residential that gets converted, so could you do a commercial that still matches the rest of the surrounding buildings and such that is not brick? And I think that's sort of what you just pointed out there is, you can.
well, also, like, when we
So
were,
what would you allow?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so it goes back to what would you allow, as long as it has the right
What about-
design.
What about the Smithfield Station?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an example, it's not masonry.
Yeah, it's been tough to do with masonry. But when we looked at the O'Reilly's Auto Parts, I don't think anybody was super crazy about the design. But we really didn't have much to talk about. Like, we didn't really have much to stand on. If we had said that O'Reilly's need to be a nice colonial looking brick, it would have greatly changed the appearance of that building and it would have made perfect sense to do there. Yeah, Smithfield Station would have been tough to do with brick. And then it would look like a regular hotel, which is kind of not what it was going for.
You mentioned the building that you thought was rather done well by Dan Smith. In particular, what building is that?
It's next to the State Farm building on,
Canterbury Lane,
Canterbury.
right before the skating rink and, so it's
When
Advanced
Liberty's gonna
Auto,
build their
the State
church.
Farm, the orthodontics office, skating rink.
You haven't had braces in a while, Chairman Brown.
No. This is, I have not. Are we talking off of Ben's Church
In front of Kroger.
in front of Kroger? Okay, that's what I was getting. Okay, thanks.
Well, then, here's one of the problems that you get stuck with a lot. A big chain business or whatever sort wants to come in and they want their look. And, they pretty much try to cram it down your throat.
Like Publix, don't they have a siding, like a cemented siding?
Publix,
which I know is coming to the county, or I hear it's coming to the county. But I mean, it's a grocery store that kind of has a different look than your
Yeah.
traditional, like Kroger and Food Line.
Yeah, it does, I think.
Yeah, I think it does. I don't know.
It's got a green theme, and I think you're right, at least.
Yeah.
A grayish brick, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But my point is, they're gonna come in and they're gonna push really hard, and a lot of localities have just said no. I mean, I think James City County is pretty strong about that. They said, you can come here all you want to, but it's gonna have to look like.
Well,
You
we
know,
ran into that
and they
with
still do.
Taco Bell, you know, they said they wanted to do this. We said, those colors really don't go. They said, well, we're not gonna do it. Well, they did it. You know, they
Yeah, 'cause we had
conformed
the
to
color
what.
limitation.
Right.
Keeping our community looking like what we want it to look like is the top of mind. You know, and it's okay. It's okay not to have a Taco Bell. You know, I don't think anybody in town's gonna have a fit because they can't get a 10-pack of tacos at 2 a.m.
But they're about to have a fit because we don't have Chick-fil-A.
We've never had one. Keep improving growth, we might have a Chick-fil-A.
But that, don't you remember, several, the auto parts stores and the. they
Oh, we
all-
had not the DAV thrift store, was that what it was?
Yeah.
No,
Goodwill.
it was a Goodwill.
Right.
And they brought us this white block. It says, this looks like all other buildings. And we didn't want to approve that.
Because that's the way all the buildings look.
Right. And luckily they wound up not building, but having the ordinance behind us to say, not only do we not want to approve that, we won't, and here's why.
Yep.
And look, we're okay without the third or fourth thrift store in town.
Well, I guess, and I think probably we leaned on James City County, Williamsburg a lot the last time, but maybe we can lean on them a little more because I think they're really strong in this regard.
Agreed.
If that's what you want to do.
And I would tell you, most of those big national chains have the architects who can still impart their corporate mantra, if you will, into whatever design element you want. If you can provide them enough leeway with signage or whatever else, they can typically work enough of the design into whatever your mold is. So,
We need a fountain in town. Page 18 has a picture of a pretty fountain.
Is it as pretty as the one in Charleston?
It might be. It's close. We have a tough time with palm trees here still.
Yeah.
But you know, that
The one in
fountain.
Charleston I'm talking about has a pineapple on
Oh, yeah, it does. It's down, I know where it is, at the end of King Street there, I think. But yeah, but everybody knows that fountain because everybody takes a picture by it in Charleston. It would be kind of nice to have one of those in town somewhere. Maybe it's not in the historic district, maybe in another district in town that people would like to visit.
Did you mention something earlier about the bike path on Church Street, that if there's renovations and stuff, that the people that are renovating, changing, developing new would contribute towards the bike path? Did I
As
hear that
consideration
comment?
for us, yeah, I mean, not necessarily build it, but at least, you know, have some right of way out there where if it were built or when it's built or whatever the case might be, that there is a place for it and they understand that's part of the master plans to develop bike trails and walking trails through town.
What about areas of the town that need sidewalks but don't have sidewalks, and places that are gonna develop in there? Should there be something in our guidelines that says they need to contribute something to escrow in order to put that money aside for that use when that becomes necessary to do something like that?
Otherwise, you'll never get them.
At least dedication of the land. I don't know that I'd be in favor of saying you need $10,000 towards a sidewalk project for your property. I don't know that I'd be in favor of that, but we do need 10 feet of your property across here to.
But Sherry Vincent had to put in 100 feet of asphalt.
Uh-huh.
Why wouldn't her money just go into an escrow account and she's contributed when she developed and she's done?
That would have been a better idea, because
Yeah,
Yeah.
and by the time they're all connected, you have a maintenance issue.
Nothing
I
makes.
hate the sidewalks
And,
to nowhere.
and just put yourself in her position. She had to spend all that money for something that
Right,
she gets.
and she's got liability
And now it looks like
when it
it's
starts to
being
deteriorate.
overgrown and looking terrible on our property.
That was just it's a really
Yeah.
ill-conceived plan.
I think they had the best of intentions. That's another unintended consequences, I imagine. But I don't want to, and that's a very good example, Dr. Pope. What I don't want to see is, you know, a 100-foot sidewalk and then nothing, and then another 100-foot sidewalk. There's one there at St. Luke's as well by the
St. Luke's Medical Center.
yeah, St. Luke's Medical.
Yeah.
They have a brick sidewalk. It's overgrown with grass and everything else, so it doesn't look good. And it probably, if you were to develop the rest of it now, would need to be repaved. So you just wasted money. You created impervious surface, which is not good.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is at Turner Drive, between Tractor Supply and Turner Drive. Would there be a sidewalk there in the future? Would there not be a sidewalk there? What would you do with that development in the future? Would you ask the developer to contribute? Or would it be in our guidelines? Is that legal? Is that a proffer? Or is that an issue
Well,
to
that
say,
would
hey?
be- It's gonna be a rezoning anyhow, so it could be a condition of rezoning that it be installed.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to think
Yeah,
where
I
are
mean,
sidewalks that we would want them and where would
I-
they be?
In our comp plan, we said we want to be able to walk from Luter's
One end
Porch
to the other. Yeah.
to Turner Drive. And so that would probably be appropriate to put in here of how we achieve that goal, is how to get there. You know, also like in front of Royal Farms along South Church Street, you have the road, and then you have the pan, the gutter pan, and a curb, and then the sidewalk. And there's no green space between it, there's no, anything breaking up the traffic to that. And I'd like to see that be wider. It's more attractive when it's wider. And it's safer for the pedestrians and more likely to be used. You know, whether we require them to install that now, or, you know, I think that depends on the project and where it's located. That certainly should be part of our ECO, because that's what we're, you know, our historic overlay district and everything else, we always hold developers' feet to the fire on. It's like, this is what we're requiring.
There are also limitations on cash properties, though. You can't make somebody pay one, but if they offer one, there are rules about how long you can hold on to the money before you have to spend it. There has to be a capital improvement plan that identifies the project. So in this instance, it would be sidewalks. And there's got to be a realistic time frame when it's going to be installed, and you can't just sell them somebody's money forever and ever. So that, the law kind of limits you in that regard.
I think I've asked this question before, I don't remember the answer, but if a developer comes in, let me just pick on behind Royal Farms, a gentleman that did the condos, and he hadn't developed it in a certain amount of time, why can't that expire?
It just doesn't. There are no sunset clauses on rezoning unless, some developers have offered them, but you can't require them.
And if he were to sell that property to me and I did something, why would it not then go back to its original zoning for me to start over? I mean, those types of things.
Zoning follows the land, not the developer.
Yeah. The only thing that expires on that would be his state permits. He has a 5-year window on most of those.
And like, well, zoning follows the land. Just, Eagle Harbor was zoned like in the 50s. And, no, maybe it was the 70s, it was the 70s. It was much larger than it is now. And they came back, the new developer came back and said, we want to reduce it from this to this. And that was the leverage they had, was because nobody, there was, a lot of people didn't want to see anything. But that was the leverage they had, because they reduced it from this enormously dense project to something that's less. So it just, like, my point is, it doesn't go away. It stays there for a very long time.
And are there, take the Tasty Freeze, for example. If I bought that and said, all right, I'm gonna remodel it, I run out of money, is there a time frame in which we say you have to have your project completed by? Does a building permit expire
Building permits expire. They do.
if there's no work? Or if it's just, you've got 24 months to do the job, or you've got 5 years to do the job?
I there's a time limit on the building permit, it's supposed to be completed within a certain period of time. You can renew them if you're still, actively engaged, but,
Well, there's a house at the Outer Banks that has been perpetually been worked on for 35 years, and they legally can't make the man finish the project because they didn't have anything in place that time. What prevents that from lingering and lingering and lingering on some type of project? But we have to say within a reasonable amount of time, this project needs to be wrapped up.
A good attorney.
yeah, the building official doesn't have to, renew the permit.
But can we set a
There's,
guideline?
there's an answer for that, because we got it with the Tasty Freeze. And there was only so many extensions they would allow, that the building department, the building inspection department would allow before it expired. And he had to do a little bit of work, and then he had, because it got expired, or extended at least one time. And there were only, because you brought us the answer, I remember, I just don't remember. I remember you bringing us the answer, I don't remember what the answer was.
Well, I'm just curious. I just making sure we're doing this, that they know there's within a time frame at which they should have their project completed, and it just doesn't linger and linger and linger and linger.
We've had to do that. We've had people, there was a house on Smithfield Boulevard that, you may remember, they never finished the masonry. I mean, for years.
We have one in Virginia Beach, went on for
And
years.
we went after them and made them finish it. I mean, they're mechanisms, they're just not easy.
So where do we stand? Do we have a consensus on the,
Can we kick this off at next month's meeting, or do we have a full agenda already?
Are you inquiring if we can have the consultants
Mhm.
here? So what we're planning, they are traveling from out of state, so we are planning on kind of having either a special BHAR meeting so that we can have them in a 1-week period, where we would have Planning Commission and BHAR in the same week so that the consultants can meet with both boards.
Do you have a timeframe for that, September, or?
Right now, I'll know more next week, once we meet with them and kind of go through what we have talked about tonight and give them some ideas on what the Planning Commission would like to see.
So I'm assuming this is on our agenda for next week? too,
Yeah.
would be home? Okay.
Yes. It's actually not, I apologize. We have had the discussions with the BHAR already
Okay.
about the guidelines that they would like to see. This was about the same time that we had brought it to Planning Commission, but we got delayed at the Planning Commission level. Thank you.
And our ECO extends 500 feet.
That is correct.
Is that appropriate or larger? More tentacles to stick out, but because the west side is not 500 feet.
Is none of it 500 feet?
I don't know. I know the building in the back wasn't
The
500.
building in the back, wasn't, we know that one.
So I'm just asking, is 500 feet a legitimate number?
Pretty long way.
Yeah, but Looter Sports has got some places aren't 500 feet, and their entrance corridor still, and they're visible.
We don't have to just add it tonight, but think about it. That's all I'm saying. It's 500 feet enough.
Additionally, just on that note, we do have instances where within that 500 feet, there are duplex units. If you remember on Wilson Road, we had a fence, a rear fence, that we were required to bring to the Planning Commission for ECO approval because it wasn't a single-family detached dwelling. So if that's something that you'd like to remove from the Planning Commission, because it would be a duplex, it's a 4-unit, there's 3 4-unit structures out there that do fall within the 500 feet.
That's probably an unintended consequence too, because nobody ever thought that it would reach back over on Wilson Road.
Right. Right, so you try and say, well, if it's visible from your main entrance, okay, well, that's pretty vague. That doesn't cut it, so you gotta put a number on it. But if you extend it to 1,000 feet, you know, you're 2 streets in now, and that's not your intention either.
Well, it says entrance corridor overlay, so I mean, I think the initial thinking was it would be what you see riding down South Church Street or coming in on Route 10.
Would you define it as the lot that fronts the road frontage and the depth of that, whether it was 20 feet or 300 feet or 1,000 feet? How does that tie to Pierceville when there's multiple lots in there that they're developing and which lots are frontage and which ones aren't?
Well, they're in historic district at least, so that's covered.
They're in both. They're gonna come under purview of both.
Of the overlay and the historic district,
Yep.
so those are pretty much in line.
Yeah.
But if Farmer Service did something in the back and they're over 500 feet, would that not come into the restriction, even though it's on the same lot facility?
And then the question is, do you really want to impose ECO guidelines on essentially a industrial complex?
That's what it's heavy industrial.
X number of years.
And we just told them that they can put storage containers, shipping containers. Well, we still want the front of the building to look appropriate as you enter town. And we still want it to be properly landscaped and kept up, even though it's an industrial area.
So we discussed several issues, but we haven't come up with a consensus or wording or anything.
Well, I think the idea is, this is the information we're kind of giving to our consultant to look at, and these are what some of our concerns are, and we're looking for some guidance on how to solve these issues. These are where the Plan Commission's concerns are, and some, you know, preliminary discussion. Here's where some areas we'd like them to focus, so that we're giving them guidance and they can bring us back some solutions to these.
And Beaver may have some different issues. Their focus tends to be a bit more in the weeds than ours.
Okay. Setbacks. Any ideas on setbacks? The new comprehensive plan recommends that we reduce them. From 40 feet to 20 feet to make it more walkable, make the town commercial areas more walkable.
And what type of zoning?
Entrance corridor, this is entrance corridor overlay.
The setbacks are tied to the zoning though, aren't they?
Generally.
I think in that comment, and that's where we saw the pretty picture from Red Point towards Q Daddies, of they were trying to encourage us to bring
Yeah.
the buildings to the
Right.
front,
Yep.
which may make sense in that area, but it may not make sense in others.
So yeah, you bring the buildings to the front because if you widen the street and add a sidewalk to make it walkable, you've got to cut into that frontage anyway, so it would make sense to do that.
I think that's a case-by-case basis.
What sits in the ECO guidelines now is they've done it on stretches of road, and I think the stretches of road, how they have them laid out, are laid out well. I don't see any need to change those. So you would look at from Route 10 to Battery Park, and then from Battery Park to the bridge, and lay them out, and those, because I think what you want in each of those areas is a little bit different than what you may want town-wide.
Overall.
And we do that in the ECO guidelines here, and they even do the bypass and the way it ought to be landscaped and what ought to be on and off that. So I think when we look at those, we need to look at those areas specifically as opposed to as one. And I don't remember seeing it, but we certainly would want to look from South Church Street down Battery Park to the town's border past Nike Park there, so that we design what we think that needs to look like, because that absolutely is an entrance corridor into our town. And however much we have control over on Nike Park should also be considered. Which we kind of have some plans already coming for that, so.
I'm trying to understand how that would apply, because Battery Park and what's proposed there now is pretty much residential. And I think these setbacks that's being recommended that we reduce is relating more so to commercial development.
Well, that's why you look at stretches of road, right? Because you don't do, what you don't want to do there, what you would do over here by the packing plant. Because, you know, our town limits go out past the packing plant, so you won't, while that is an entrance corridor, it's not the same as maybe South Church Street or North Main Street or West Main Street or wherever else. I think that's why you break these up into areas that make sense, as is already done in the ECO. Because when you look at Battery Park, you already know that that's a residential area. Future, our future plans for it are residential, and you design your ECO based on what's there, what's anticipated to be there. Whereas perhaps from Battery Park to the Cypress Creek Bridge, you know, we think that should be commercial. That's where you reduce those. You know, so you look at each area separately to see what makes most sense for that area. And you can do it in blocks. I don't think you need to have 1,000 of them, but, you know, 10 or 12 is probably more than enough.
The other thing, I don't know if this is an ECO guideline, but on Battery Park Road, I would preferably not to see major commercial development down Battery Park Road. Meaning, I don't want to see a gas station, convenience stores, and things of that nature go down
So we
Battery
control
Park
that with
Road on
future
the
land
undeveloped.
use?
I don't know if that's future land use, or if this is a specific corridor saying, hey, should we allow that type of use to go into those empty lots that are fronting Battery Park Road? You know, where the Farm Bureau ends and where the villas start or end, that's the extent of our commercial development down Battery Park Road. I'm just don't know if I want to see a Wawa down there, you know, type stuff.
Well, you know-
As that still becomes a major hub, I still
Right.
would rather keep that a residential or appropriate commercial, like Bristow's landscaping, things of that nature, you know,
That
to
was
keep
my
that type
question.
of commercial, but not another bank, not a 7-Eleven, not a Wawa, not a restaurant down that area. But that's my thoughts on limiting what goes down Battery Park Road.
If we wanted to do that, Mr. Rick, how do we address that?
How do you address that zoning?
The zoning, future land use?
You'd have to change the zoning to permit it.
But as it's currently zoned, it is residential now.
So it depends on
Community
which
conservation.
pieces you're talking about.
From,
There is commercial down there, because there's a cabinet shop down there.
Right,
There's
at the
church is
intersection.
there, and there's Bristow's Landscaping.
yeah, it's at the intersection of Nike Park. But,
I think the corner lot, you remember, you know where you turn onto Nike Park? The corner, as you make the turn, the corner on the left, that was zoned for a convenience store, because I rezoned it for, when it was in the county,
Because a
20
former county
20
administrator had big plans for
20
that
years
corridor.
ago for, it belongs to Wendy Dean's father, or it did. And I don't know what the status of it is now, I don't think it was included in, rezone.
But remember, a former county administrator had big plans for that corridor, for developing that corridor.
Correct.
So Dr. Pope says he doesn't want a gas station there, right? And just hypothetically, we all agree to him. If it's already zoned for such, though, we can't do anything about it, can we?
You cannot. I can't,
are we talking the intersection Nike Park and Battery?
Yes,
yes, there used to be a
on the
house.
Gatlin Point
Used to be a
side.
Yeah,
house
house
where they
that's
had
out right
a
there on
big
that corner.
fire exercise.
Right, I remember the house. That's not included in the Battery Point?
I think so.
They're not, it's not owned by,
I don't think they owned it.
It's small. I don't even know you could put a gas station on it now, but it's not owned by the Mallory Scott Farm. It's separate from
No.
that. But they own everything around it.
Didn't they recently tear the house down?
Yeah, they did. They did a
Defined
lot of
recently.
training
Well,
exercises.
define it, what's the recent part, like 10 years ago, recently.
That parcel, I believe, is community conservation. When you turn right onto Nike Park and it's that square on the left-hand
On the
side.
Gatlin Point side?
Yes, we have it, it says that it's
It's
zoned
not. It was
community
re-
conservation.
I don't know how that happened, because it came into the, I rezoned it when it was in the county. I know it was commercial.
Well, that's pretty odd. But when I think back to the Mallory Point, there is a circle, a roundabout proposed for that intersection. I'm trying to understand.
It moves into the woods.
Yeah.
If you go back to the plans, Nike Park stays where it is, but that roundabout moves into the woods because that's their property.
Across from it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I do remember that the developer said that the roundabout would have to move. I think he said further north. I think he said it, if I
Where we get
recall.
our fountain.
It has to move further into the forest at the T, the current T. It has to move into that. Okay. But it would have to be rezoned. It would have to be rezoned if someone wanted to put a station there, a gas station, which you would not want.
Depends on what the zoning is currently. That's why I was asking if it can expire.
That, our map says CC. I don't know how that happened, because when it was annexed.
Okay. Any further discussion about that? No? Well, I just have one more comment about updating this, and that has to do with the drawings, the maps themselves. Area photograph, looking at corridor 1, you have that area, but just below that area, you have the line drawing of that map. And that is, I don't see a page number on here, but from the PDF file, it's page 75. It's the one that's titled Map Corridor 1, North Church Street, Business Route 10. When I look at maps, one of the things I look for to give me some sense of location is cross streets, intersections. And in this one, I don't see any cross street that's named, and I would like that to be updated. I would like for those maps, the names of these streets to be added to give some sense of cross-section. I think that would help everyone understand the exact location of what these maps are depicting.
Yeah, that's Route 666, is that?
Yeah, I believe
Road.
that's Berry Hill.
Berry Hill, yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Because and that's changed, because that's where all the Pinewood Heights
right.
buildings were. And I don't believe there's any, but that corner lot there is the only one left. Pretty irrelevant to this discussion, but still.
Yeah, but looking at some of these drawing maps, these, the line maps, I think it would be helpful if you added some cross streets, the name of cross streets.
That's easy to do.
Yes. And I think the other one was 5.2 map. That one was trying to understand it, and this location was very confusing to me.
There's a historic farmhouse on here.
look at 5-2. That's Ben's Church Boulevard, Route 10 bypass.
What PDF page are you on, sir?
The PDF is 89.
89?
Yes.
Wrong page. Okay. Yeah, it's over by Cypress Creek at the
Yes,
overpass there.
it took me a while to discern that, but yeah. I'm thinking what is that, the Parkway, that intersection there where the overpass occurs, that's Parkway Drive or something like that?
I believe so. And then it's
Cypress Parkway, Cypress Creek Parkway?
And then it's Cedar and Jericho, but you can't access them from the bypass.
Right. Yeah, but something wrong, yeah. You can't go into Jericho from there. And it seems like it's showing that,
No, but it'd be nice if it were labeled so you know what you're looking at.
yes.
We will have the consultants update the aerial and mapping with current technology.
Great.
Okay. Because it's showing Jericho as if it's connecting to Route 10, and I don't believe I don't think that's the reality.
It is not.
So those are some of the concerns I have. Anything else? I'm seeing the same issue with the Northtown Gateway. Those streets are not named. That's Ben's Church Boulevard, Route 10 bypass. That's 5.3, map corridor 5.3. That's page 91 on the PDF. Those streets are not labeled. That's pretty much all I have. Anyone else? Any other commissioner comments? Hearing none? Okay, item 6 is closed. And that takes us to approval. Item number 7, approval of the Wednesday, May 24, 2023 special meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recommend as presented. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, will the record please show that I abstained from that vote? I was not at that meeting.
Okay. Attorney Ritter and Director Clary, you all making that note, of course? Yeah. Okay. So item number 7, approval of the minutes for May 24, 2023 special meeting has been approved.
If we could, sir, before we close, I should have done this under council, commission comments. But it didn't occur to me, or it didn't remind me until we were talking about some of this tonight. Some time ago, the Board of Supervisors was considering selling some land at the YMCA that the county owns, where the tennis courts are. And the idea was, that the concept there, which it did not go through, was to develop that property. And we had some talk and concern that that property is already zoned for residential. And we wanted it to stay Parks and Rec, which is what it's used for, but that's not what it's zoned for. We cannot rezone property without the applicant requesting the rezoning. I would like, if Planning Commission is agreeable to it, to ask the county to have this property rezoned Parks and Rec and come through us, and we will take care of that, so that we can keep that pocket park downtown and the area where the tennis courts are there now. They are looking at selling a small section of it to a neighbor so that they are protected. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But I want to keep the remainder of that property as Parks and Rec, or whatever is appropriate for the YMCA and its potential future uses, so that we don't lose all of our developable land in town. Now, we can't force them to do that, but if we were to have staff send the county administrator a letter and requesting that this be done, perhaps they would be amenable, and we can speak with our, and I'd be happy to, if you guys are in agreement with this, speak with our rep, Mr. Grice, to see if they would go along with this, so that we can kind of protect some of that area from future development. Because the only way that we will ever keep it from 100% from being redeveloped is if it requires a rezoning, and the planning commission chose not to rezone it. So I'd written a note about that, and I'd meant to do this several times and just forgot to talk to you guys about it.
Is that including the ball field?
Yes, sir.
And the playground, all that area?
Yes, sir. Yep. And I don't know what all the zoning is over there, Dr. Pope, because I don't remember it.
We're just looking at it as being downtown residential.
Right, okay.
Even the Y,
Even the Y.
which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Can we wait until after the sale is complete so it doesn't limit the buyer's ability to do what they might want to do on their portion?
Well, my understanding is that the county's already approved that sale. It's a
Okay,
small
so
section.
it's not
Yeah,
gonna impact
So it
them.
should not impact. My
Okay.
intention is not to
So
impact
that
that sale
subdivision
whatsoever.
It looks
Is
like
the
it's
done
already
deal.
been created in those map, the piece to the, talking about, but, Hippolytus,
Yes.
it's already created.
So
Okay.
that's done.
So they're,
Okay.
so they're done. Good.
Not yet. The subdivision plat has not been recorded yet.
Map sure shows.
It's on the map.
Well, my point is not to upset
Right.
that whatsoever, but the remainder of the property
Gotcha. Oh, yeah.
stays.
absolutely. Yeah.
That, we would like to see this pocket park down there. And I believe we have it on our future land use map as such. I know we discussed it. But I would like to make it a little bit more permanent to protect that area from.
Not having that is
development.
how we got duplexes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds appropriate.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you would have direct staff and to do that, and if everybody agrees, then that would
You
be.
want to maintain, you want to maintain it as residential?
No, sir.
No.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, I'm sorry, Parks and Rec.
Yeah, it is downtown neighborhood residential right now. So if the county were ever to sell it for whatever reason, whoever purchased it could go in there and would be subject to our DNR regulations, which have very small setbacks. You could probably fit 50 or 60 houses in that park if you did it right. And I don't think that's what we want to see. I don't think that's what that neighborhood wants to see. And if the Luder project, the Grange moves forward, the field across will be developed pretty intensely. So this would at least protect this piece as a pocket park.
It's Parks and Recs. But part of the property will be residential that some adjacent owner will be acquiring.
There's just a little tiny sliver.
Uh-huh.
The sliver between the house and the existing tennis courts.
Yes,
It's actually, they already have one, but they're getting a bigger piece
Right.
to give them a buffer, I think.
Yeah.
that remains residential, but the part with the
Whatever's
tennis
left-
court and such is,
Whatever's left over after that
will be
transaction
Park and Rec.
should be Parks and Rec.
We don't have a Parks and Rec zoning.
Well, we
Um,
have
It would be community conservation.
community conservation. Yeah.
That would be appropriate. But again, we can't initiate it. We can only ask for it.
so we should ask for it,
No, we can't.
We can ask the
ask
county
that
to
they-
apply for it.
Yeah.
to apply for it.
Yeah. And it would be appropriate to have staff write a letter to, and maybe it's Michael Stallings, our town manager, would be appropriate to reach out to Randy Keaton and
Yeah.
the county administrator and say, hey, we'd really like to see this. Would you guys consider, rezoning this property so it falls into this community conservation piece?
Well, I have no objection to it, so,
Do we need an official motion?
yeah, that's my question.
I think it's really should come from the town council, not the planning commission.
Can we recommend
It's a
to the town council?
recommendation
To town council, okay.
Make a recommendation.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I move we recommend to town council that they ask the, what's that guy? What's Michael's title?
Town manager.
Town
Town
manager, request that the county, request rezoning of the area that they own into community conservation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. As proposed.
I thought you said we just couldn't do that. I had to go to the town council first.
That's a
We're
recommendation.
recommending the
recommendation.
town council
Recommendation
ask.
It's a
Yes.
recommendation to the town council to ask the county,
Okay, I thought she said Michael Stout.
well, no, she's asked Michael Stallions to write the letter. But, no, it's a recommendation to the council to direct their staff to contact the county to consider rezoning
What he said.
the property located on James Street, where the high school and the YMCA ball parcel.
Do you want to repeat your motion?
I don't think I could at this point.
Okay, let me try.
What Bill said.
I think Mr. Riddick has captured it, and
Okay,
that was my intent, Mr. Chairman.
okay. I'll try. We have a motion and a second to recommend that the county,
No. Okay.
the town council, I'm sorry, the town council
Instruct the town manager to contact the county administrator about requesting a rezoning of that property to community conservation.
Yes, we have that motion, what she said.
And I will second
And a second, we have
the
a second.
Hillegas, Riddick motion.
Everyone understands it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, call for the vote.
Mr. Yoko?
Yes.
Mr. Swecker?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Davison?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hillegas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan.
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion carries. And no further planning commission meeting business. This meeting is adjourned. And I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight and participating.